Greetings, everyone, and welcome to TRG 30, where weekly, and it is nice to be back, we are talking about bold change for our sector's resilience and post-pandemic recovery. Today, we're looking at stunning results from two of our clients, but more importantly, we're talking to two leaders about how their organizations and their teams have arrived where they are today. And as always, I want to cue you up to listen for some things, and they include innovation, the first of two words that Ann Leota's book signaled were critical to our moving from crisis to recovery and the next stage of these cycles that we go through in our society and as human beings. Innovation. Is yours a culture that supports innovation or one that is waiting right now for things to return to normal? The second word, and what we'll hear these leaders talk about today is relationships. How you're managing, think about how you're managing your relationships internally, externally. You'll hear them talk about the same in their organizations. And finally, focus and alignment. Are the people in your organization rowing in the same direction? Are we looking at the same destination on the horizon? Be thinking about these three things as you listen to our guests that I'd like to introduce now. First, Angela Cassette is the managing director of Music Theater Wichita in Kansas here in America. They serve more than 65,000 patrons every summer, 5 main stage musicals, Broadway caliber. They have a $4 million budget, an enthusiastically loyal subscriber base, the largest actually in the state. And Angela is an extraordinary, thoughtful, forward-thinking leader whom I'm pleased to welcome here today in just a moment. Also joining us today is Elizabeth Newman, the artistic director at Pitlochry Festival Theatre in Scotland. This theater is stunningly beautiful, I can attest to having been there, and similarly is a destination for locals and has a huge tourist audience that it attracts every summer. Elizabeth is a visionary, passionate, as you'll see, and inspires agility in her organization at every turn. Before I introduce them, I want to brag on them and their organizational results by quickly sharing some details and data, and then we'll talk about how they got there, how they as leaders managed their organizations and what it means for their future. Music Theater Wichita canceled their summer season. Many of you were in the same boat and made the same decisions, but with innovative offerings and a strong focus on relationships, the results that you see here are pretty incredible. Retaining 98% of subscription revenue, increasing annual fund results, philanthropy by 34%, increasing the number of contributing households by 46%. Elizabeth and the team in Pitlochry saw an opportunity in the pandemic to attract new audiences and put together an entirely new holiday program. And wow, did people respond? They exceeded their target by 4 times, engaged new audiences, as you see here, at record levels, and they're outperforming our COVID sector benchmark by 7 times on lapsed patron re-engagement alone. And then restrictions force them to change and adapt again. And now, Magic of Christmas, as they're calling it, is both an outdoor promenade experience and filmed performance, partnering with local cinema. It's catching major press attention nationally and catapulting the festival into a national conversation about holiday offerings, best of, and the response. I'd like to invite both of these terrific women to join me. Angela, welcome. Elizabeth, welcome to you. And I'd like to start, Elizabeth, with you actually. Your team's agility has wowed us. Really, it's bar none. How have you created and harnessed and supported that agility and made it company-wide? Tell us about that.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's lovely to be here talking about this during such an important time. I would say, to be honest, it's down to them. The team have been brilliant, and they've gone with a very distinct mantra, which became, well, our new program when lockdown hit, which we decided on in 24 hours, which was a series called Light, Hope, Joy. I remember really distinctly staring at a wall thinking this pandemic is going to last a lot longer than people think, and what are they going to need? What are the audience going to need? And in a time of crisis, you need light, and you need hope, and you need joy. Little did we know how long it was going to go on for, and is still going on. But actually the title of that programme has underpinned everything we've been doing within the organisation, which is about positivity. The programme itself includes lots of partnerships, learning, things for people of different ages. It's about art, it's about nature. We even have a gardening series as part of it. So all of these things have helped the people working at the theatre to cling on to who we are still, which is an organisation of positivity that looks to the future and wants to help people make sense of the world through art.
Well, that light, hope, and joy has given them maybe an anchor for the agility. Angela, we've talked at length about the experimentation and the innovation in Wichita that your organization has been demonstrating. So really, how are you doing that in your organization? What's it look like? What are the values that guide it, and how are you leading innovation?
Sure. Well, we've always been a team of utility players. We've got a lot of cross training. We've got a lot of, people can do a variety of things. That has become next level during the COVID era. And we don't have a lot of silos at Music Theater Wichita. For example, like every member of our staff attends board meetings. We've had to become a little bit more top down in the Zoom era just for efficiency, but there's still this feeling that the next great idea, the next truly important piece of information could come from any member of our staff. And I think that's what keeps us all functioning well. There are a couple of experiments that I've been really proud of. One is that we launched a membership program, which many other theaters and organizations had done, but we had resisted, mostly because of the bandwidth required to operate something like that. But during the start of the pandemic, when we were looking for ways to stay connected to our patrons, it just fit and helped us continue to experiment with new types of digital content and new sorts of things. And it's the type of thing that we will continue post-COVID. It will be something that we will use to cultivate major donors, cultivate legacy givers. And then in our education realm, we've been doing a lot of experimentation as well. Distanced education programs are really challenging. We've tried things like, our teen choir, the artistic team for that, filmed on a football field with a drone camera over the summer with distance. There are just lots of things that we've tried. And I think those will have a life beyond COVID as well, especially as we try to reach new groups of people and new audiences.
Yeah, both of you are here not only because of the results, but because of this ease that you appear to have. And that your organizations have demonstrated as you've had to adjust, readjust, think, shift, and not every organization does that easily. Elizabeth, you talked about light, hope, and joy, and there's that sense of positivity I know imbues the culture there. But as you think about how you've had to lead a crew through, especially recently, adjusting and readjusting, what's the leading way that you help make that happen as a leader? How do you facilitate that as a leader?
I think it's two specific things for me that are always the things that underpin everything, which is honesty and empathy. So for me, what's been really important to gain the support of the staff when we've had to change things and when things have kept changing is about being really honest always about where we are and what's happening, and trusting people to be able to share the load and to share the truth. I think quite often in leadership there is a falsehood that you have to be the person that knows all the things and not share it, because that's the point, is you carry the weight, which I do believe in, carrying the weight, in the words of Giles Corey, more weight. But I also think what that doesn't do, if you don't as a leader say to people, look, this is going to be really hard, things are going to change, it is all going to be, you know, I said to the guys from the start, we may never have an audience see this live. So when that happened and we had to move to the installation, what I got from our brilliant workshop manager, Rob, was, you said, well, you said this might happen right from the start, so it's all right, we'll just get on. And I think that sense of that honesty also helps people deal with change. And the empathy piece for us has underpinned, we started to go on a change program when I arrived a couple of years ago, and we've really looked at our values. And the thing that we were really keen to do was to put empathy at the center of our work. You know, theatre is a gym if empathy is the muscle, and the job is you come to the theatre to work your empathy muscle as an audience member, but also as artists and as other team members. So Joe Clifford, who's the brilliant playwright that said that, was spot on. And I think by conducting empathy in others, it means that when things do have to change, people are able to help each other, because the first thing they think about is, I need to understand what someone else is experiencing as well as myself. And that has led all of the change, and all of the conversations about change is the transparency and honesty and the empathy for where we are as individuals, but also where the audience is, and just allowing it to not be okay sometimes. Sometimes it's just hard, and just sitting in that together.
Yeah. So Angela, both of you, but Angela, one of the words that I ask people to be thinking about as we're talking is relationships. And relationships, it builds on what Elizabeth just said, internal relationships and external relationships. So as you think about how at Music Theater Wichita, you are leading internally and thinking about external relationships. What does that mean to you right now in terms of your leadership action?
Sure. Gosh, that's a great question. You know, I think as a team, our internal relationships, we're stuck in this Zoom world, which we all, you know, that's not how we like to be. And so I think we've wrestled a lot with that, and we've been really honest about how difficult that is for us, and especially some more than others. And I think having some really tangible projects to work around, you know, we filmed a holiday special. We're getting to a point where we're envisioning some outdoor live theater, those things that feel like this is what we do. Those have been so great and really helpful for all of us as people trying to find our way during these times. And then I think externally, the relationships and with our patrons and donors has been a lot about getting the right message at the right time with the right vehicle. You know, we've had these really elaborate, like whenever there's an announcement, you know, these people find out at this time, and then 2 hours later, these people know, so that, you know, actors aren't finding something out after it's been released to the public. And it's exhausting, but it feels like we have to be as respectful as we can of the people who have put trust in us at one level or another.
Yes.
So we're trying to be really governed by that respect.
So action is confidence building, even when we're in a time that feels unfamiliar. So that's what I'm hearing you describe, these experiments and projects that give you some experience in succeeding, and also the work flows kind of related to the stakeholders you have externally. I think, Elizabeth, as I think about relationships, community relationships are something that the field is thinking a lot about right now, especially in the context of what many have called a twin pandemic. And I'm curious about how in Pitlochry, your organization or you are thinking about the calls for racial justice and what that means in your organization?
Yeah, so obviously everything that happened when, and I agree, it's a twin experience around Black Lives Matters. It did have an impact on the organisation immediately, and one that's carried on having an impact. So I guess the first thing to talk about is what we did immediately, which we started an inquiry. So we invited all of the Black artists that we've worked with in the last 12 months to join a conversation, which is ongoing and has been ongoing every few weeks since that first meeting, which is leading to an audit of everything that we do and how we do it. It's already led to us changing some of our approaches to casting. It's already led to us thinking about how we're going to curate work in our new studio theatre that we plan to open next year.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, it was really hard. And I remember ringing Chris Bryce, who's our exec director, and him and I having a really long conversation after the first inquiry about what had come up from the artists. And some of it was quite difficult to hear. And it wasn't just about their experience inside the organisation, it was actually very much about their experience of the place, of being in Pitlochry, which is an all-white community with the exception of 3 Black members that I know about in our 2,500 population. And we do have diversity around other European cultures in Pitlochry, but it was very hard for Black artists to come here and work. And historically that didn't happen several years ago. So we've had to face some home truths, and what Chris and I are now working on is how we evolve the organisation in the broadest sense, from the board all the way through the organisation. But that needs to be done, as I said before, Jill, with honesty and authenticity and empathy. And to be honest, by making sure that as we go forward, that the decision makers reflect the world that we live in, which historically in most industries that has not been the case. And a lot of what came up from Black Lives Matters in the UK was very much that people had kept silent about lots of things for a very long time. So one of the first things we've had to do is to listen and to hold ourselves accountable for not seeing and not hearing in the way we should have done. But again, we're making those changes because we can all have conversations and then nothing can happen. It's important that, and that comes back to your point about action in everything that we're dealing with right now in the pandemic. The thing that I know we feel most proud about at Pitlochry Festival Theatre is we've taken action. We haven't just sat there and waited for somebody else to solve the challenge that we face, but also what we've tried to do is participate in the solution for the public. And that's the thing that's really important, is we have to be organisations of action, not just nice chat.
Angela, I know as you think about the market of Wichita and the importance of relationship and meeting the community meeting the community, action is important to you too. And I would just invite you to characterize how your organization is thinking about the expansion of those relationships and associated action.
Sure. Yeah, I can't even remember where I heard it in our community, but there have been some conversations in our community that basically boil down to, like, what kind of city do you want to live in when this is over, when COVID is over? You know, where are we going to be in 5 years? And for us, I think we want to be a more inclusive, diverse, like an organization that serves more of our population than we have in the past. So it really is about those, like, how do we take action? How do we make changes and take steps so that when we are looking into the future, people say, oh, I feel like this is my theater, this is my organization, and not be as concerned with like what sort of statements are we putting out today, but what sort of actions and what sort of thinking are we doing today that's going to lead to change in the future. And some of the things that we've been forced to do during the pandemic and some of this experimentation, I think is going to be very helpful. We had a behind the scenes apprentice program for high school students that was always in person. Your parents had to drive you to the theater every day to do it. Well, there are probably lots of really talented kids in Wichita whose parents can't drive them to the theater every day. And the way that we morphed that program this year, where we literally dropped boxes off on teenagers' doorsteps and had, you know, instructions for them to follow, that's something we might be able to continue in more of our population, and really start finding talent very young and very early. So we're excited about the opportunities that COVID has illuminated, even in spite of all of the suffering it has brought to our industry as well.
Boy, both of you are so passionate and positively acting. It's so impressive. And Stephen, I know I can see the questions are coming. Help us make sure we're talking about the right things for our participants.
Sure, thank you. I'm going to delve straight in so we can make the most of the time that we've got left. And I wonder, Angela, if you would take this first question. So many options that you both had to evaluate and take action on. Are there any tools or approaches that you've used to evaluate and choose amongst these infinite options?
Oh my gosh, if you can figure that out, whoever is asking that question, please send me. It's so hard. There really are so many things. And I think we have had a couple of missteps where we've taken on too many things at once, or, you know, committed to too much of one thing. And then you start feeling that burnout, because when you're testing and experimenting, if something isn't going to catch on, it's really better to know that before you've devoted hundreds of hours to it. So I think, you know, we've tried to learn from some of that and always take things back to mission. You know, we have across the organization, there are lots of conversations about, you know, what is the audience for this particular thing? Like, who's going to be invested in this? Why are we doing it? And for somebody who likes to just get in and do things, that's a really important thing for me to take a step back and figure out.
Thank you. Elizabeth, a Brexit question from Ben, our friend Ben. As US observers of the UK, we've seen the deep divisions around Brexit. Are there lessons you learned, or in retrospect, things you wish you had done in that moment to promote greater social cohesion that our friends in the US can learn from?
That's a tricky one, because Brexit is not just one thing. I think that's the big thing about Brexit, is a decision was taken a few years ago now in the UK to do something that I need to announce personally. Doesn't necessarily meet my values, but as somebody who is leading an organization, you have to also understand that is what happened. So we are living in that place. I guess you can do it through lots of different ways. So for me, I need to talk about another theatre that I used to run in Bolton. So I used to run a theatre in Bolton, which is voted to leave the European Union. And for me, my answer to that was to produce Summer Holiday. That was our Brexit conversation. And that was about us having a conversation about young people and their freedom to travel, and the hopes and dreams that came within that. And a far less obvious way of talking about Brexit, but that was the conversation we ended up having with the audience, which was brilliant. And then when I came to Pitlochry, we did a different version of it, but Scotland needs to have that conversation in a different way, because Scotland has a very different relationship to Europe than England or Wales or Northern Ireland. So I think that's the other thing, is that quite often we're observed as one entity, and actually Scotland is a very different country, which is important to acknowledge in this moment around Brexit. What I would say is I think the best thing that theatres can do to facilitate community cohesion is to bring communities together to have food and art.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a technique that I've used in every organisation I've ever had the privilege to be the artistic director of, from a small theatre company to a small theatre in London to a theatre in Bolton to now being in Scotland, is that if you can bring people together who vocally say they are different to each other, and they eat food and they share art at the same time, what you are doing is just helping them to see they have more in common. And one of the happiest moments I ever had in Bolton was we did large-scale dinner parties for our communities when there were two 80-year-old women who had been in Bolton for 60 years apiece. One of the women was from one of our Muslim communities, and the other woman would have self-defined as white British. And they'd never had a conversation, even though they'd lived in the same community for 60 years. And they thought each other was very different when they sat down next to each other. But by the end, the other was having henna painted all the way up her arm. And they were swapping numbers and talking about what their children were doing. And that is what we can do, in the same way as when we turned the theatre into a beach, the police came round and said it was the best example of community cohesion they'd seen. There were all people, all faiths, genders, ages, everything. And you saw two children from very different communities with their nappies off. We had to then ask them to put their nappies on because there was lots of peeing in the make-do sea. But they were playing together and their parents were talking. And these things are what we can do to bring people together. So it's not necessarily about putting on the Brexit plays, which is what I used to think when I started being an artistic director. I used to get on my soapbox at every given opportunity. It's often more effective when it's far more about looking at Maslow's hierarchy of need and getting people at their fundamental level, versus the immediately going for the transcendence and expecting a play to flick the switch.
I love listening to Elizabeth and Stephen. I know there are more questions here that are popping up. So is there one more that we can take?
Angela, perhaps you'll take this one briefly for us, from Anna. During this challenging time of reset motion, have you experienced any resistance or reluctance to change from either the staff or board? And how did you address that? What tactics would you give to help address that?
Yeah, I think we all resist change every moment of every day. It's how we're hardwired to do that. I find that I really have to start by checking my own resistance to change. We have a producing artistic director who has been with our organization for 30 something years, and most days I feel like he's much less resistant to change than I am. So I think, you know, it's really like the speaking to whatever loss that person might be experiencing by change is a good place to start, and just recognizing that. I think this is about survival. You know, I also saw the question about the public university. We're right now, like, we're all trying to survive. So I think that these ideas of like, this is my turf, we don't have time for that. It has to be like, what can we bring to the table? If we want to exist in 5 years, we have to bring everything we have, and then we have to learn new things and bring those too. So hopefully, you know, there can be really honest conversations about like, if we want to survive, we have to change.
Yeah, boy, is that right. That is so right. Stephen, you'll take us
Thank you.
all day to both of these two. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we just such a great conversation. We've got 2 more TRG 30 weeks left before the holiday season. Eric Gensler from Capacity Interactive is with us next week, and Zani Voss will be joining us to wrap up the year in review. One quick data point from our benchmark: while we're still at a fraction of 2019 levels of revenue, both in the UK and the US, aggregate ticket revenue in the UK is rising. Look at this, it's actually exceeding, with gifts, donations exceeding what we saw in November 2019. We're going to be continuing to release more details on that. And don't forget, you can visit us at trgarts.com to find out how to join the benchmark and sign up for more news and insights from there too. Elizabeth and Angela, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And we will see all of you next week at the same time for TRG 30. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.